So, I want to bring this towards a slightly more grounded place because that's what we try to do with Red Planet, and I want to ask about your work specifically because because on Blood and Turf you talk about turfs primarily. You expand out, and as you said already, you talk about the worldwide transphobic movement, and not just one. But that is your primary focus, and so what does researching into the gender critical movement, like entail? I guess I want to get to a place where if people were curious about getting into doing similar things themselves, they could maybe ask you some questions.
Yeah, so I think the way that I think about these cult groups is that you know what? Let's actually talk about the case study.
Okay.
Because the case study I picked for this
Perfect.
wasn't actually TERFs.
Fantastic.
It was a conspiracy theorist group that's quite operative in the UK called the White Rose.
Yes.
You're aware of. Neil, do you know about these guys?
I've heard the name, but I don't know much about them.
The White Rose are mainly known for their god-awful stickers that are on lampposts all over the fucking place.
Yeah. There's one in my local dog park, yeah.
They're all over the place, they're innumerable. It's quite a large group. It's based on Telegram. It's an anti-vaxxer group. It's essentially a notionally decentralized propaganda distributing system for rather hardcore anti-vax stuff. And it's interesting because it's kind of like the ultimate example of a cultic milieu. So to answer Sophie's question, the manner in which I interact with White Rose to investigate them is like both the simple stuff like the online research. You can just like go into their Telegram, click through their posts, search through their various Telegram archives, look at who the major figures are, who's doing what other groups they're connected to. Oh boy, are they connected to various different fun groups. That stuff's easy. That's just basic open source research. And then there's kind of like more physical direct stuff where you're actually like going out and looking at these people in real life and seeing what they're doing.
It should be noted for how the White Rose view themselves that they've taken the name from an anti-fascist group that were resisting Nazi occupation in World War II.
Yeah,
there's the famous photos everyone knows of like the young people. There's like one young woman lying up at the gallows, sort of thing. And it's like that's how they view themselves.
They think not taking the vaccine is that.
They think it's
they do.
Yeah. And I realized where I've heard the name. I've keyed these stickers off lampposts around my neighborhood before, and I've looked at it and gone, "Oh, that's just some stupid small ass group." But quite clearly not. Quite clearly, they're
a weird thing I started noticing with White Rose stickers recently because I'm just such a cool person that I pay close attention to the evolution of what these things are saying, and I'm looking at them all the time.
Quite cool around here.
I think they really started shifting from being more accessible to someone who isn't already online and isn't already super plugged into just insane shit. They started shifting recently, and a lot of the rhetoric that I'm seeing in like White Rose stickers now is all dog whistles and all like second degree dog whistles where like you really only know them if you're plugged right into those conversations, and they don't even pass as like normal things to say or a normal thing to be on a sticker. They've just put this thing here so that if you're one of those guys, you will recognize it and that'll be good. And that's the only purpose of it. What did you say, Em?
That shift has definitely happened. I've noticed that too.
Right.
So as I said, the ideology of the White Rose is that they believe that the vaccine is a plot by the one government. Neil said that he thought they were a rather small group. In the wider anti-vax movement, they're not the largest, online grouping. There's a lot of overlap between the various different kind of like key organizing chats and online hubs. A lot of these people will all be in the same forums. For context, the White Rose chat on Telegram has about 10,000 members. Most of those will be in the UK. A good chunk of those people, of those users, will not actually be real human beings. I know that they used to have a massive problem in their chat with just like Bitcoin spam. Going back to the conversation about MLMs, there's a hell of a lot of that stuff that you see if you like keep an eye on Telegram chats for this kind of stuff.
And that makes sense. Because they'd want to prey on people who are susceptible to this cult-like behavior.
Which crypto is very
Bitcoin
much
scams.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's like sometimes I see people talking about NFTs and stuff, and I'm just like, man, like you guys are an inch away from like fucking, like building a church and just, putting up 1,000%. A little bored ape fucking sculpture or some shit. It's
a bored ape NFT, but it's just a bored ape on the cross.
I'm sure that's already been done. I'm sure
yeah.
A degree of religiosity in some Bored Ape stuff. But yeah, so the reason why I think White Rose are interesting is because they're like fairly tight knit compared to some of the other larger, more kind of like loose and sloppy groups within the anti-vax scene. But they're still quite large. Their mission is reasonably identifiable. It's quite clear that they have the intent of stoking interest in anti-vax stuff, essentially in order to convert people into relatively hard right and somewhat anti-Semitic political actors. There's a range of severity of anti-Semitism within the White Rose community. Some of it's very, very explicit. Some of it's slightly less so. Depends on your degree of familiarity with anti-Semitic dog whistles. So when you're looking at the anti-vax movement, what you've got to realize is that it's not really a movement where the concept of like a leader or hierarchies is important. It very much is like a milieu cult as opposed to a hierarchical cult in the way that like a lot of church organizations or political parties or martial arts clubs might be, clearly hierarchical with, identifiable leaders and fucking finances and their own buildings and stuff. Whereas with things like QAnon or the TERF movement or the White Rose, there's significant figures, there's internal celebrities, there's, people like Piers Corbyn, who's a big anti-vaxxer in the UK. Jeremy Corbyn's rather embarrassing.
Yeah, we were talking about him the other week.
There's movement celebrities, but there's no kind of grand party of the anti-vaxxers where they all got membership cards. Although I'm sure some of them would love it to be the case. Rather, the thing that's important is to understand that it's like a leaderless blob that's kind of ambling around doing a million different things at once. So
also, Jeremy Corbyn's made kind of overtures to getting some of his brother's fans on side recently.
Really? I must have missed that. Can you tell me about
that? So it's like some of it is like, and I've said the same things myself. I don't want to get too bogged down in it. I'll send you a longer message on Twitter, but like some of the stuff is very valid criticisms that I've made myself about the specific implementation of vaccine passports in the UK, because of how fucking terrifyingly authoritarian they are and how the government's trying to take our data to give to fucking Cambridge Analytica. That's very valid, but he kind of goes overboard with it and is kind of like just opposing measures that other governments are doing, completely normally, as if they're bad entirely. Which is in my wheelhouse right now, because I'm not, the whole thing I'm doing right now is about leftists who try to reach out to conspiracy theorists very foolishly, thinking that they can make handy allies out of people who are also into stigmatized knowledge.
Right. Yeah, I have to say I haven't paid attention to Jeremy Corbyn in several years, and I don't think I've lost anything for it. No offense to any rump momentum members in the chat.
By the way, piggybacking on something you said like a while back, but did you know that Jordan Peterson is going to be a speaker at the upcoming Bitcoin 2022 conference?
Oh,
Just
wow.
a nice marriage of different culty perspectives.
Oh, that whips.
That's really rules. And also Andrew Yang is at this, for the record. But that's not also really interesting. It's Jordan Peterson.
It's also really interesting because I don't know if you saw that as well, Nicole, but there were people in the crypto community who were then saying, hang on a minute, are we the bad guys?
Yeah.
Like this guy is a piece of shit. Why is Yeah.
And I'm sure those are the minority of the comments. I mean, I would like to think there weren't, but like, I'm sure that most people are like, yeah, right. Because it makes perfect sense that a crypto bro would be a Jordan Peterson fan. But like the fact that some of them were like, wait, are we the baddies actually? Are we on like the bad side of things? So that was very interesting.
It's hilarious that Jordan Peterson is the thing that tripped this off. If it wasn't,
I know, right? It wasn't like anything else at all. It was just Jordan Peterson. It's incredible.
What if money laundering operation had a bad vibe?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, because they just, well, it's funny because it is, again, like, it's that stigmatized knowledge of like, oh, we're doing things outside of actual currency, but they don't see it as being horrible because they're like, oh no, it's just, you're just not allowed to talk about it because it's a new thing, it's a new cool thing, it's going to save the world. Oh yeah, like it's
I heard an ad for a podcast that's a Bitcoin podcast. I think it's the guy who has the biggest Bitcoin YouTube channel already is now starting a podcast, and in the trailer they say like fiat currency doesn't have to be backed up by gold or anything else, it just has to be backed up by guns. And I was like, okay, based, you guys don't get to say this. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, what the hell?
Yeah, because they're like agreeing with it, right?
No. They are saying as a sincere and correct criticism
they're being
that money doesn't have any real value. It's just backed up by state monopoly on violence. And they're right about that.
And then they go say, well, we should make another one.
So much stuff.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
This is what I'm sure that this will wind up being a separate topic. Probably not. Well, we'll see about Red Planet. But this is part of the issue with the UBI. Speaking of Andrew Yang, like Yang's proposed $1,000 a month UBI is directly from Charles Murray. Charles Murray, by the way, author of Bell Curve, is like the biggest political advocate of UBI right now. And I don't think people realize that, which is really scary.
Thing? I thought it was a Nixon thing. Murray.
It's been around since like John Stuart Mill. It's a really old idea. But like,
a lot of people don't realize that Charles Murray is like, he's a his thing is politics and pushing legislation, and the bell curve is like a thing that he created that ties into that. Like, he's not primarily like a like a fucking brain measuring guy that occasionally forays into politics. It's the other way around, you know. It's like he created.
So his hobby is like racial, like racism.
Yeah, racial science.
He got really into race science for like a couple of years in order to back up his plans for society. It's fucked.
But then it's like, that's kind of the thing that he's most known for now, you know. It's like, it's wild.
But that's Yang's version of UBI is Charles Murray's version of UBI. Like, it's fucked and it's not good. And it's like, as with the Bitcoin guys, it's like the solution isn't getting people money. If the money is there so that they can meet their basic needs, just meet their basic needs for them, you fuck.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm yelling.
Absolutely.
We have a guest or something and a topic we're supposed to be discussing, I guess.
Let's get back to that. Sorry.
Right. So to kind of like do a little recap of the answer to Sophie's last question, which is now lost in the mist of time. The manner in which I investigate cults on the ground is that either I turn up to their events and see what's happening. Most of the time it's protests. Or I engage in like relatively deep dive digital research, see what's happening, what the dynamics are on their forums, what the kinds of things they are that they're saying, the way that things are changing or not changing, as the case may be, things they're becoming interested in, losing interest in, that kind of stuff. It's a combination of like very basic online open source stuff, a bit of archiving, and turning up to their god awful events. For just a quick tip, if anybody's going to do this for themselves, I would not recommend turning up to an event the first thing you do. It's not that it's unsafe; it's just that you won't get anything out of it.
It'll just be really upsetting. I guess
looks weird as fuck to an outsider. So if you turned up to one of their big like anti-lockdown rallies, you're essentially just going to see like a carnival of stoners with a whole bunch of religious fundamentalists tacked in for good measure, and you're probably not going to be able to make any great analysis.
I wonder if I can
That's kind of what's happening with like the protests that we've had for the anti-lockdown, anti-mandate kind of people down in Parliament at the moment. It is such like a wide range of different ideologies.
Yeah, very, very heterogeneous movement.
Yeah, the mainstream media is having a hard time kind of categorizing it, you know, like the people like because a lot of left-wing activists were talking about how there was like, you know, like a significant like kind of white supremacist element there. And then, you know, the mainstream media were going down and being like, well, look at all these like Maori activists, you know, and they seem to be like, you know,
there'll be white supremacists. There'll be people from like various different ethnic or social minority interest groups. There'll probably be like a very small number of squatters. There'll be some like old school hippies, and
there's like all of the above, right?
And there'll be a decent chunk of religious people, particularly Christian.
Yeah, a significant chunk of religious people. And like the thing is that it's like, you know, like the media is looking at it and being like, okay, well, so there are white supremacists here, like there's a handful of like Nazis or whatever like that, but like they won't be thinking about like white supremacy as like divorced from like individual Nazis or whatever like that, you know, but mainstream media, they don't make these distinctions or whatever like that. And so people watching it are just like, oh, it's just it's a whole bunch of Fruit Loops or whatever, as opposed to like, there's a bunch of different distinct groups that all have these things overlapping or whatever, you know. It's kind of like it does a disservice to everyone because they're like, they don't know what to look for, they don't know who these different groups are, or you know, what kind of what goes
This
on.
is why I would advocate essentially for making like a bit of digital sleuthing the first place that you start. And this is thankfully really easy with the anti-vax movement because unlike with like hardened neo-Nazis where you need to like create like false identities and pretend to be them, which is frankly something I cannot be bothered doing, is also arguably quite dangerous and is quite difficult. With the anti-vax movement, it's fucking colossal, and they want absolutely everybody to join all of their horrendous little forums. So you can go in there and you can just like join in and like see what they're saying. At this point, I should issue a safety warning. Being exposed to cult bullshit for a long period of time is a cognito hazard. It is bad for your brain. You will start to see stuff where you'll think, wait, but there's a tiny kernel of truth in there.
Yeah.
And it will start to worm its way in, no matter how skeptical and critical you are in your thinking. This happens to me all the time. It happened to me with tough stuff when I was reviewing the audio of the LGB Alliance conference, because they design their language to be appealing to absolutely everybody. There'll be something in there for everyone.
I want to co-sign this because, as I already said, I do a lot of the same work myself. I've spent way too many hours on Stormfront. I've also looked at a lot of Mumsnet. I've also like a lot of the same stuff, and it just wears your fucking brain down. And exactly as M says, it just like these guys are trying to get people to believe in them and underestimating your own like ability to get looped into that, or just like thinking that they can't be good enough to get you or whatever. It's just like, what makes you so special? You're not special. Like they'll get you.
Nobody is immune to propaganda. I know it's kind of a meme, but it's true.
And
it's
also really
false idea that is very popular around cults is this notion that they only prey on people who are vulnerable or who are in some way mentally deficient or stupid.
Totally.
Absolutely untrue.
No, one of the people that I know that was personally involved in a pretty terrible kind of cult that there's all kinds of abuse going on. Herself and all the people that she knew that got into it together were all like extremely intelligent people, all like professionals in like tech and like kind of, you know, these fields where they're all highly educated people and stuff. And they always thought, like, I remember her saying to me, I didn't think that I would ever fall for a cult. And there were times where we talked about it and we were like, no way, we're too smart. Like, there's no way we've been sucked in. Like, we are analyzing everything that's coming to us from higher up. We, you know, like, we have, like, together, we have, you know, like, so many good, like, analytical skill sets that there's no way that we would fall for this. Like, you know, and it's like, I think that sometimes some cult setups maybe kind of put people like that at more risk, you know, like that are more appealing to more intelligent people than.
I want to say a couple of things. One is like I was watching Alex Jones's most recent appearance on Joe Rogan for research for my video and for timestamps for animation clips I'm doing. And like Alex Jones was explaining himself in ways that like made him very relatable, like very, very easy to like follow along what he's saying, especially when I've been doing a lot of research into what it is he means when he's talking about like organ harvesting factories and hybrid hybrid humans and demi-humans, and when he's talking about like aliens and the breakaway planet and all this sort of stuff, like, because I've been researching it, I know what it is he's actually kind of like, not that he's trying to say it, but what it is that he is the shape of a real world conflict that really exists that he's trying to describe. And then once you can once you have the key to decode the language, it's actually really easy to get sucked in, because actually getting sucked in is more to do with like having some kind of emotional connection. And when you understand that conspiracy theories reflect intergroup social conflicts, right? When you understand that, and you can understand any conspiracy theory that's put in front of you by its context, and understand what it is people are really saying about who they are and who their enemies are, you can start to go, oh, well, I understand why you feel that way. And suddenly now you're empathizing with them. It's a whole thing. And I wanted to say as well, this is a useful thing. It's from my script, so it is me blowing my own horn, but it is also something Nat said to me. I think so. I'm also hyping up Nat. Nat said that I just think this is such a good observation. That the way conspiracy theories work is like ghost shows. Like, most people who watch a ghost show are thinking real ghosts don't even look like that. Like, they think they're smarter than the other people who are watching the show. And that's how all conspiracy content and grifters and all of that, how they all work too, is on people who think that they are smarter than everyone else who's watching.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, in fact, I think skepticism or opposition to a group's belief is actually like one of the key ways that cultic groups recruit.
Right.
Interesting.
I wonder if I could get someone to go to Caleb Morpin's CringeCon.
I'm not doing it.
I'm gonna take it to that.
You also get like sort of
George Galloway is speaking there.
You also get kind of upset as well as a leftist when you see these conspiracy theorists as well, because they're so close to getting it that it gets extra depressing.
Exactly.
It's like holy shit, these motherfuckers are running 1,000,000 miles an hour in the wrong direction. It's like they're saying things like, don't trust big pharma, the government is out to get you, like all these things that are like true. And it's like Soph said, like they get it right sometimes. Like sometimes they say like absolutely correct things, and you're sat there going like, why can't you just understand that it's capitalism and it's fascism that's doing this, not fucking what you're saying. It's not fucking holy shit.
What helps me is to remember that...
you go for it.
What helps me is to remember that like it's all emotional reasoning. So it's like the reason someone believes this is not because they've seen facts that they think stack up to make a good case, but because they had an emotional truth that they were trying to justify in the first place. And so when I'm in danger of being like, but you said something based, so maybe you're cool, I think like what actually is that emotional reality they're trying to defend. And a lot of the time it's just bigotry. At least, with conspiracy theorists, that's, I think, a distinction with cultists, because obviously, like, cult does so much more direct interpersonal abuse. But
I think there's like a thing, like, that's why I really kind of like have a lot of mixed feelings with a lot of these people that are getting tied into the current, these conspiratorial kind of protests in New Zealand. There's a lot of these kind of really, I guess, like naive, like these groups forming of the like Maori kind of activists. Well, these people that are turning into activists or whatever, that are people that have historically been oppressed by the state to a point where they like they have very like justifiable reasons to be distrustful of the state, to not believe it. They've been lied to by their face. Like, that's just a thing. Like, growing up Maori, the government lies to you. You see it all the time, and it's like literally like written in the history books they teach you at school. And you're like, I know these things are factually untrue or whatever like that. So something like this comes along, and like the government starts showing up and telling you have to do these things, blah 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 or whatever, and they are immediately distrustful or whatever. And then it just takes like one person to kind of swoop in and start offering just bullshit conspiracy stuff, and they just get all on board because they're like, I know these are lies, I know blah 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 whatever. And it's like so fucking frustrating, because there are so many amazing people out there that are giving the legitimate reasons, like people explaining you know, like, this is what the government's doing. This is what they've done in the past. When they lie to you, whatever, blah, 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 you know, explaining how colonialism, capitalism, global capital, all that kind of stuff gives a consistent reason why the government operates the way it does. Yeah, you know, like this, like a very consistent kind of thing that you can look at and be like, okay, well, this all makes sense together. But like, you know, there's just like this other element getting in through fucking Facebook or whatever, being like giving like these crazy inconsistent arguments and things, but much, like, I would say, like, appealing much more to the emotional element, you know.
Well, this is why leftist theory, like giving leftist theory to conspiracy groups, is so dangerous. And it's, I know I keep on talking about my fucking video, but like, this is why I'm doing this video, is that like giving leftist theory to conspiracy groups is a terrifying thing to do, because the reason we believe in a story we hear about historical events or whatever, you hear the moon landing was faked, right? And the reason you believe it or don't believe it comes down to normative similarity and historical similarity. How many people around you also believe it, and how well does it map onto what you already know of history? And so, like, if you already know that the CIA faked blah, 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 X, Y, and Z, then you'd be like, oh, the moon landing faked? Yeah, I believe that. Or if everyone else around you, when someone says it in conversation, goes like, oh, yeah, 100%, you'd be like, oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And like, that's what's so dangerous about leftist theory, like, and leftist, like, you know, the giving the revolutionary science to QAnon is so dangerous, because like they can then construct more conspiracy, more fabrication that exactly maps to like the maps to a Marxist understanding of the world. They can claim more stuff is happening in higher detail to make it even more convincing to the people who they're manipulating.
I mean, you see
one
this
of the
a lot.
key things you need to...
Oh, cool.
No, you go first.
I was going to say there's a lot of similarities between like when we're trying to explain capitalism, the influence of the ruling class, when you're saying like you can use like those bits and then they can turn into something else. Like think of like the Jewish question, when it's like the cabal is controlling the world, like they can take those seeds of truth about these, like the ruling class is running the shit, but then they can steer it however they want. And if you don't have that basis, if you're just like willing to absorb any ideology, then I just, like what you're saying, it just don't go to like people that are like in that mindset and then just deliver them your version of reality. It's probably not going to be the best thing to do.
One of the key things about these like larger and more stochastic conspiracy theory groups is basically that they're just incredibly good at engaging in ideological syncretism. So if a belief system is syncretic, then it's capable of performing syncretization, which is or it's what the fuck is the verb version of this? You know, the word syncretic, basically it's like the melding of...
I think syncretization was right. I think you got it.
Yeah. It's the melding of ideological systems together, of like components of them together. So you get like versions of Christianity that are in like essentially like former European colonies that take on aspects of the previously existing local belief system, is an example of syncretic beliefs. But conspiracy theories are great at doing this. They're particularly good at doing it around things that relate to politics, because part of the purpose of modern conspiracy theories is to explain, you know, the goings on in the big goings on in the world that are a little bit too kind of like unpleasant or complex for people to want to really closely grapple with, and also that they're quite often bullshit about. So in that context, it's quite obvious that conspiracy theories would gravitate to being very strongly about political matters.
This is just kind of one kind of conspiracy crank to another end, but I feel like this is something that we say a lot, is that they provide simple stories, and I'm not sure that's true.
I think so. They provide stories. The stories are not necessarily simple. I think it is that the stories are suitable.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that I don't think that comfort is wrong. I think saying they're comforting is an exactly correct thing to say, because there's so much building on
there's like these stories also agitate, so arguably saying
True.
that it's comforting would be
but it is, because that's what I'm saying. Like, there's so much building about anxiety as a driver of believing in conspiracy theories, and like just tons, right, on how psychologically anxiety drives people to believing in conspiracy theories, and it fundamentally comes down to a kind of comfort, even if, as you say, even if sometimes the story is agitating people to go and do something.
Right. The way that I would describe that kind of comfort is essentially that the purpose of conspiracy theories is to explain everything at once. And if they can explain everything at once, then it means that it can link together the various sources of discomfort and confusion in a manner that is like has some degree of like ideological unitary character, so that it becomes like a singular point upon which like mental energy can be focused, rather than like continuous overstimulation from seemingly unconnected things. Things suddenly become like glued together in the grand plan.
Yeah. You're not doom scrolling, you're just getting ready for the big day.
Yeah, like
that's
the Rapture, Agenda 21, the Revolution, whatever it might be.
There's also like this thing I've noticed a lot, where a lot of people, especially in like QAnon groups and stuff, like considering the work, you know, what they refer to as the work that they're doing, like just sitting in these groups and like reading shit and reposting it and stuff, like they consider that like they consider it like work, or like, you know, like this is their praxis or whatever. There was a video recently of the tinfoil hat people down in Wellington. There was an interview with the woman who is kind of like one of the leaders in the group, Carlene Hiriora, who was saying, you know, like they're interviewing her, saying, "Who are you?" And she's saying, "Oh yeah, I've been doing work in the child sex trafficking you know, area for years now, and I've, you know, like I've liberated 15 children and all this kind of things like that." And it's what she's talking about is just sitting on Facebook and reposting things and sharing things and stuff like that. But to them, they're like, this is part of it. This is what I'm doing. Like, this is my praxis. I'm
fascinating.
Kind of, yeah. It's wild, and it's kind of like the you know, like the social cred that they get from. It's almost like gamified, you know. It's like this thing where they're like getting this kind of like stimulus, this kind of like clout from other people for the things that they're doing, and it's like, yeah, it's just like, it's a wild thing that I've noticed mainly with I guess like the Twitter and Facebook kind of like conspiracy things and stuff. It's like, I don't know, I feel like there is some kind of like gamified kind of thing to it there, like the accumulation of like renown and some kind of clout or whatever within these spaces is like really fucking fascinating to me.
Yeah, same.
So I think that this is actually the key to the whole thing, because the gamification is really a bit of a modern way of describing what's going on here.
Yeah.
Essentially, these people are right. They are doing work. They are actually doing work. They're just not doing the work that they think they're doing. They're not doing anything.
That's a good way of
what
putting
they're
it.
doing. What they're doing is what leftists would call social reproduction. So in a leftist context, social reproduction is like a form of production, economic activity that occurs within the economy, and social reproduction specifically is the reproduction of society, most specifically the workers themselves. So it's you know, things like, you know, having sex and raising children, keeping households like in order so that people can live in them to a satisfactory degree, that their quality of life is you know, commensurate with the work that they're doing and their status in society. It's making food, it's doing domestic labor, it's all of that kind of stuff.
But also the whole entire education complex.
Right. Well, now this is where we get into the weeds a bit, and this is kind of where the explanation to do with how these cults work how these cults operate comes in.
Yeah.
Some aspects of social reproduction are ideological. There's the construction of ideologies and the construction of people's like thought systems. That's an essential part of making effective workers in a capitalist economy, is making sure that they're, you know, the manner in which they think about things in their day-to-day life are correctly engineered, without wanting to get too much into, you know, our own conspiratorial ramblings about the evil capitalist mind control plot, which we will save for a different show. But basically, if social reproduction is occurring on an ideological level as well as on an individual level, then you've got this situation where, you know, systems of ideas are being made because people are putting effort into making those systems of ideas. They're writing things down. They're engaging in thought. They're engaging in communication. Everything that happens in these forums, all of these people, posting truly intellectually fascinating stuff where they believe that the Russian invasion of Ukraine is an NWO hallucination in the White Rose chat, which is something I'm scrolling through right now. They are engaging in the social reproduction.
My guys are also denying the war's even happening. That's good. It's a good time.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Well, you see, if they deny that the war is happening, then it means that that's another thing for them to talk about the fact that the mainstream media is lying to them and you all live in the
these guys, like my guys, are largely funded by Russia Today, so there's a pretty clear bias going on. But it was when Peter Coffin denied the war is happening was when I was like, shit, I gotta put this asshole in my fucking script.
Oh my god, of course
I gotta put this asshole in my script now. Fucking hell. They actually also made a George Soros tweet. They fully off the end. Anyway.
Oh wow.
Peter, no.
Disappointed but not surprised.
They've always got something amazing, Peter Coffin.
Yeah. Anyway.
So the key part of cults is producing the ideology. It's baking. It's writing the scripture. It's posting about how incredibly good we are at defeating child abuse and producing incredibly long Instagram clip videos where you walk around in circles in Trafalgar Square yelling into the phone about how you've just had a showdown with the police that involves you talking to them about Magna Carta, right?
Yep.
Stuff like that. The reason why that is, reproduction is because they're fucking making things.
Yeah.
So if you've got production, then there's something happening. Like there's material being made, and the material is being made to get consumed. And if it's being consumed, then there must be some kind of metabolism consuming it. Which is where we get to the argument that I think is actually quite persuasive about how to understand cults, which is the argument that Mark Galanter makes in his book, Cults, Faith, Healing, and Coercion, which is that cults are systems. They're systems in the manner in which, like, systems analysts would describe systems. They have physical characteristics. They have particular boundaries, like physical boundaries. Feedback occurs within those systems to ensure that there's, like, quality control. If you disagree with some things, you'll be kicked out. In a factory context, then feedback would be the literal quality control department, making sure that the tins of tomato soup don't have too many dead flies in them. In the context of cults, the dead flies are non-believers or people who wish to split and form a slightly new belief system.
Or FUD.
Yeah, basically. That's how you get like a million different Trotskyist sects, is because the quality control system has become much too strict, and the internal tensions of the social group become just unmanageable because they're ideologically fucking nuts, and they have huge arguments over whether or not a fourth internationalist perspective requires them to denounce the government of Cuba's new trade policy.
And then you wind up with the situation where way too many of the Trotskyists in the UK are in various sex cults.
Yeah, I mean, well, to be fair, there are Marxist, Leninist, and anarchist sex cults as well. So who are we to criticize?
If you're going to be in a cult, might as well go to sex cult.
I'm just.
You may as well have the correct.
If you're having sex because of your ideology, do you have to be a trot?
I've never seen the blending of ideology and sexual relationships end well, particularly because if you've got charismatic groups, one thing we didn't touch on was the concept of a charismatic group or the concept of a high demand group. Like a charismatic group is one where there's an ideology and there's a charismatic ideological center that demands all of these things that people like Lifton would have described. A high demand group is one where a high degree of activity and commitment and like time out and resources out of someone's life is required to be a continual accepted member of the group. So there's certain, perhaps we'll politely not name them, political parties on the left that charge vast quantities of money for membership. Scientology, which rinses people of their bank accounts.
Yeah.
the neo-Nazi groups that insist that you engage in like physical violence to be considered a true member.
Yeah.
ISIS was fantastic at this because it forced people to become permanent members by coercing them into engaging in acts of violence that would mean that they would forever be persona in the rest of society.
Interesting.
Certain more like accelerationist elements of like the neo-Nazi groups in North America also occasionally engage in like child abuse or the abuse of animals, and this would sometimes be like videotaped in order to blackmail members and ensure like ideological or doctrinal adherence. High demand.
Yeah.
I've
heard of that in a group as well that was set up in Fiji for a while, and it was videotaping members and doing like all kinds of like extreme kind of like sex stuff or whatever, and it was given to them as a way to they were supposed to be kind of like shedding off all of their bodily kind of like any kind of like, well, I mean, I'm sure like they probably had a better way to phrase it, but they were like saying
they were cleansing themselves ideologically. They were purifying their
it was like this thing of like, you shouldn't be ashamed of any of this stuff because none of this is real, and it's all just like, you know, this is just like fucking worldly bullshit, and you gotta kind of like move past any kind of reservations about, you know, any of this kind of stuff. So they were like, and they were like filming all of this stuff, obviously, you know, so they could like blackmail people when they were trying to leave and all this kind of stuff. But the people like legitimately believed. They were like, oh no, I'm doing this stuff for a reason, you know, like I'm not just doing this because the cult leader is videotaping me. Like it's fucking wild.
Well, they create a rationalization. I mean, it's a pretty you're usually not even aware of this rationalization. There might be moments of clarity where you're like, this is what I'm doing, but like it largely happens like behind, without you knowing it, that you're realizing, your subconscious or unconscious realizes that you've already fucked yourself. You put yourself in a situation in which like it's going to be really, really, really uncomfortable and really difficult to get out of. So you just find a way to rationalize how actually it's pretty appropriate for me to be doing this thing, and it's actually pretty reasonable, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
it's all fake and it's the worldly bullshit.
That kind of situation which you described is so common. One brilliant online resource that I think really gets to the heart of like the nitty gritty of how cults work is a podcast called Let's Talk About Sects. And it's brilliant because it's essentially just a series of interviews with people who've left groups of this type, and the amount of times when there's some kind of physical ritual where the purpose of the ritual is to like detach the physical body from the spiritual one, and the ritual always involves something like humiliating or illegal or violent or all three.
I didn't know about that podcast.
It's almost never not something like that, right? If there is a ritual that is required for membership, it's almost always, at the very least, ridiculously embarrassing.
It's wild, right? But I mean, I absolutely see like, and even from like the perspective of the people trying to gain control over these people and stuff, there's like so many reasons why they would want that. Cool.
The Marines are a cult. That's the important takeaway.
Absolutely. Hazing.
I'm glad we learned that.
Fraternities,
Well, I mean, basically, boot camp does all the stuff that you want to do to make somebody into a true believer, and that is the purpose of boot camp. And a lot of cults will describe their indoctrination processes as being boot camp or being some kind of like military training or something like that, because they know what they're doing. And they may not know what they're doing in the way that we know that what they're doing, but they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
For real.
Right. Do you have closing remarks that are really, really important before you are shoved off of our platform, never to return? I'm just kidding. You can come on anytime you want. But if
I think it'd be great
that you think is really, really, really important right now to tell the chat.
I think the most important thing is to realize that statistically, we got about 300 people on at the minute. There is going to be people here who are like in social situations where some of the stuff that we've talked about is going to be coming up, where there's degrees of like devotion that they have to like exhibit in order to be continuously permitted as part of groups, or where they have to, or where like aspects of their belief system are constantly clashing with the world around them. I think the main piece of advice I can give, because I cannot give advice on how to get people out of cults, I can only give advice on how to not get sucked in yourself, is that while there are limits to skeptical thought and to analyzing situations, and while a lot of cults do recruit on the basis of like, ooh, do your own research, I think it is worthwhile approaching things in your everyday life, particularly things that relate to like the higher things like religion or political principle. I think it's really worthwhile approaching them with a serious eye for where problems could emerge, where bad internal reproductive cycles in whatever little subgroup you're in could emerge, where people have power that is not entirely visible, and where like aspects of your ideological belief aren't like fully tangible or fully explainable to an outsider. I think it's very worthwhile being self-critical in not in the Leninist sense at all, being self-critical in a rather humble sense. I think basically that if you can occasionally look at the stuff that you do and really think, could I explain this to an outsider without them thinking I'm completely bad? That's an important first step to kind of establishing your own information resilience, your own kind of like defensive system against like bad information loops that will destroy your grounding in genuine reality and allow some other kind of like mimetic formation to just deposit a new reality into your brain.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Complex.
Something I'd rather avoid if I can.
Yeah. I don't know. It depends on the reality. We'll see.
Yeah, that's that. I'm just realizing we could have you back on for all sorts of chat about interesting cult shit now. So I am actively interested in having you on again.
Cool.
Should we one last tip, actually? Absolutely never get into debates with them. If you do end up doing cult research, never do that. That's my
that's a huge waste of time. Again, from my experience, no.
A lot of them actually will use like debating and stuff to recruit though as well. Like
that's right.
Yeah, we talked about this earlier. It's
that's why
the most important methods of recruitment, actually.
That's why they'll never concede, and that's kind of why you see that in debate bros as well, in terms of like they don't want to, you know what I mean? They don't want to ever be like, oh well, maybe you're right about that, because they
just want to keep talking to you.
Until you submit.
Is not intellectual inquiry. The purpose of the argument is dominating space.
Nat and I actually met in our university debate club because we're extremely cool. And there was a guy there who is like British but a huge MAGA chud. He told us once that he owned 5 different colored MAGA hats. He's like an awful guy, and he was like bragging about like meeting Steve Bannon and stuff like this, where he was like so just positively excited to be a fascist. But like it was always that exact thing. Now this isn't because he was in a cult, although again I do think that the following of Trump is very cultish, but like
it is.
Yeah, exactly. But this was even before that. He as a person loved to debate and just say really provocative things and say the most reactionary, most bigoted, and most fashy things he could, because people would waste tons of energy responding to him because he had because literally, and I'm not trying to be mean, and I'm just trying to say truthfully, he had no friends, and he could only get anyone's attention by making them explain how wrong he was about something.
That is really sad, but very, very like you can
deeply
tell
sad dude. Yeah,
it's not the only time I'm sure he's not the only one that does that. Like you.
Well, he also like. I mean, before anyone gets too sympathetic for him, Nat got updates from him after we left university, and like he spent a long time just ruining a sex worker's life. He's a really shitty dude.
Yeah, no, he sounds like a piece of shit, but it's also a sad It's sad. I think
But it's worth
it's
worth
possible
remembering
to...
that as a method of engagement, because that's like the same thing with cults. Like,
yeah,
people are debating you so that you will keep talking.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
You wrote a note about homework, and I don't understand it, but we can get to that in a second, because I don't know what the homework was last week, so I'm actually just chilling out.
What was the last week's?
My other hosts can handle
chat.
everything.
Where the fuck
Right,
is
no one,
fuck, where is
no
it?
one do it, no one do it, because Nicole, last week you did the thing that I always do, and you always tell me off for doing it, and I kept stum because I'm a good guy, and basically, chat. What was the homework? Because I know what it was. Do you know what it is? Do you know what it was? And last week, Nicole, you just told him what it was, and you always tell me off for doing that.
Yeah.
No, I tell you off for saying press 1 if you know what the homework was.
No. Wait, what? Is that what I do?
You say either press 1 if you know what the homework was, or press that typically I'm like, no, make them say what it is.
Okay, all right, that's fair
Right?
enough.
I don't even know.
Wait, maybe you did that. Maybe you did that last week. I don't know.
You know
Maybe you did. I don't know.
How about this? I was
Doesn't matter.
wrong. Whatever.
No.
I was wrong. No, I'm so sorry.
No one was wrong. No
I
one
was wrong.
It's fine.
I'm the wrong one.
Yeah. Oh. The woman has to just
so sexist.
say
Yeah.
she's wrong.
Accept that. I can't
you
believe
know,
how sexist
like,
you've been.
placate
Just
the
now.
ego. It's great.
You guys don't know this.
See, it's in the chat. It's in the chat right there. DJ Mule definitely a good guy. Definitely didn't pay Empire to say that in the chat. Yeah.
You guys don't know this, but after this, we're gonna have a private mods call where Nicole just confesses all her sins to us, and we berate her, and it's to make sure that we're all loyal to Red Planet.
Yeah.
This is true. This is true.
That'd be pretty ironic.
And then next time we're gonna catch up, and we're gonna be like, "All right, Nicole, you still doing that?" Interesting.
So someone in the chat got it kind of right, but it's the only person that kind of got it right. Talk to. Oh no, the two people who kind of got it right.
Yeah.
Talk to co-workers about stuff outside of work. That's what the homework was. And did you do it? Well, a bunch of people did, apparently. Well, no, sorry, one person did. That's my bad. No, two people did. Two people did it. But yeah.
You haven't actually properly asked them if they've done it, but
yeah, well, whatever. Yeah, give us a 1
All
if
right,
you did
press
it.
1 if you did the homework, which is to talk to a coworker outside of work about something related to, work grievances, something that can help spur a conversation about organizing.
It's 3.
Yeah. We were talking about it because of that whole was it the sorry to bother you scene where the guy comes to him at work and he's like, yeah. So, little refresher.
Nat put in chat, Sophie is my co-worker. We talk all the time. And I have to say, and I have to call Nat out for that because we don't talk about anything but work. We are miserable people, and we only talk about shit that's going directly in my scripts.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. I mean, I'm seeing some numbers in the chat.
So we got some ones.
Some
we
people
got a 7.
We got 2 people just making stuff up. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So yeah, well done if you did that. To me, I thought it was fairly sort of like pretty I don't know. It's kind of simple because if someone's got a grievance at work, that's very common. If you could get them into a scenario where they're not getting listened to by like a manager or someone in the employed class, then yeah, you could just get them to unionize, and then before you know it, communism. Let's go. So well done. Well done, everybody who did that.
It's that easy, guys.
It's that easy. It's how you do it. Yeah.
For this week,
right?
What do you think for this week?
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I said M has left a note that says misinfo PSA, and that's the whole note.
Make a public service announcement here. I'm going to interpret that.
So I was under the impression that one of you was going to write down what the actual homework was.
You sweet summer child.
So I stuck this in there basically as a backup in case nobody came up with any ideas.
Well, we normally kind of talk about it with the guest and we figure out something.
We workshop it.
Yeah.
That's exactly
what was your idea then?
Well, so basically, one of the reasons why I became particularly interested in conspiracy theory beliefs is because, aside from the anti-fascist connection, is because I also do a lot of open source investigative work,
which we discussed not last time, but last time I was on 2 weeks ago, OSINT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a complicated field, and a lot of it relates to misinformation and people who are pushing particular sets of ideas for particular reasons being debunked by as close to hard evidence as people can manage. There is going to be a lot of misinformation flying around over the next several months regarding the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Left-wing audiences will be particularly vulnerable to this because there's pre-existing biases within the left-wing community regarding the political situation there.
You're telling me.
A lot of those biases will be perhaps particularly favorable to the Russian side. I would encourage people to look out for particularly things that they find themselves agreeing with but something feels off about them. And then to properly investigate, not just looking for talking heads who discern it, but for if there is a piece of actual direct physical evidence about it, which might discern whether or not something is misinformation, and whether or not there is somebody out there doing open source analytical work to discern whether or not something is misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
For example, just before this stream started, there was a video that was circulating on Twitter of an extremely large explosion. And I knew as soon as I saw it that I'm going to be seeing that again and again on my conspiracy theorist channels of people claiming that it's a tactical nuclear bomb. It wasn't a tactical nuclear bomb. It was just some fuel dump blowing up that happened to make a mushroom cloud. But that's the kind of thing that gets misrepresented as NATO deploys tactical nuclear weapon in huge war crime in Ukraine, or thermobaric missile destroys blah blah blah, and actually it was probably just a warehouse full of bombs that got hit by an errant round. So misinformation, misattribution of cause and effect, identification of the incorrect party, this is exactly the kind of thing that will happen in a war. It'll particularly happen in relation to the spreading of conspiracy theorist political narratives, and I would encourage people to keep an eye out for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a much lesser example than the level of panic of claiming that a nuke has been set off. But earlier today there was the picture of Ahed Tamimi, who was then. So Ahed Tamimi is a Palestinian teenager, or was a Palestinian teenager who was filmed yelling at and then slapping a full. Sorry, before I imply any reasonable prosecution of this child for violence, the dude was a soldier in full body armor with his huge gun, and she went to jail for berating him basically. Anyway. Earlier today, I saw the picture of her yelling at him, being shared as this is a Ukrainian girl yelling at a Russian soldier, and I was like, no, it isn't.
Oh, I saw.
No, it isn't. That's a famous. What the fuck are you talking about?
All the time with wars. Another big one that's been going around recently is there's a whole load of footage that's from moderately realistic video games.
Yes,
that gets
the armor video,
dog fights between jets.
Yeah.
And of course, there was a whole bunch of stuff that was pumped out by the Russians just before this kicked off.
Of course,
where they were attempting to do helmet cam videos that were, speaking as someone who attempts to debunk this stuff, frankly a bit laughable. I guess my misinfo PSA would be watch out for that stuff, particularly if there's something about it that seems directly catered towards your prior assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be
also one thing that
don't be paranoidally critical. Most of the stuff that you see, unless you're just constantly consuming stuff from Redfish or Russia Today, most of it will be fine. Just be sensible.
I saw one thing someone had pointed out was that a lot of the there are official Department of Defense Russian videos being put out there, and Ukrainian as well, that are things that have been proven to be false, or whatever like that, from both sides. And one thing that people were noting was that a lot of the false videos have been tweeted out in English, whereas the other ones are not. And it's kind of is this a deliberate thing to because they know that it's American audience, mainly American audiences seeing this stuff, and they're they're not there, they don't exactly know what's happening or whatever, so they're particularly vulnerable, so they tweet them out in English, thinking that, oh yeah, cool, they're gonna keep spreading these things and it's gonna, share whatever. But which I thought was quite interesting because it does show, like a level of, like, I mean, if it is intentional, it is a pretty, like that's kind of like a 4D chess kind of move from both sides.
Yeah, it's worth noting that some of this stuff is deliberately made to be incredibly bad, so that it automatically selects for people who are gullible enough to fall for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Unfortunately.
Right.
So that doesn't have to be a check-in next time and we hope you've done it. That's an ongoing thing for as long as this is ongoing, basically. But we will check in next week and see if people have had any interesting encounters with misinformation, I guess. And thank you so much for joining us.
See how that turns out.
Yeah. And why don't you tell us once again where everyone can find the things you want them to find?
Okay. This is me plugging myself, isn't it? Right. So I run a podcast.
You don't have to tell us if you're doing that, buddy.
Oh. Thank you. Right. I run a podcast called Blood and Turf. We're available on. I think you can find us on Twitter at Blood and Turf with the E replaced by the number 3. Yeah. I have no idea why we chose to do that, but there it is. I've also got like a personal account where I'm starting to do some more open source work, but it's not really up and running yet. I'll probably be doing a lot of stuff about anti-vaxxers and also Chinese and Russian naval procurement over the next couple of years, which is very, very niche. So if you care a lot about shipyards or you care a lot about people who think that COVID isn't real, then maybe head over to, like, I think my @ is Open Snores.
yeah. Open Snores. Nice.
You think your @ is in fact Info Snores?
No, that's the personal one. The open source one.
Oh, my bad. Open Snores? Oh, I get it.
Are you always making puns, or like is this like your
puns is like your favorite thing?
It's like I've seen so many puns. I have to say something. You're into puns, aren't you?
I had to get M to change his screen name once because the pun was just like, I hate this every time I see it. It was like Michael Chaser or something, and I was just like, I don't want you every time you message this group, I get a notification that says it's from Michael Chaser, and I don't want that. Stop it.
It was something like that. I can't remember what it was. It was very funny though. I was annoyed about
that. Nice.
Right. But where can we find Tim? That's what I want to know.
You can find me on Twitch and on YouTube as Conquest of Dread, or over on Twitter as Dread Conquest. YouTube is for like video essays. Twitch is for, at the moment, it's for Elden Ring. Having a lot of fun with that. And Twitter is just for shit posting. So, join me there if you're into that. And what about Mule?
Well, thank you, Tim. You can find me at DJ Mule at DJ Mule _ on Twitter, which is a combination of shit posts and heavy political analysis. Not the best combination, but you can also find me at DJ Mule on Twitch. It's spelled exactly the same as it is underneath my name here. And I'm also going to be streaming Elden Ring this week. It's a phenomenal game. And that's it really. I got a YouTube channel. I put my clips on there sometimes. Started to write a video. Got ADHD. Didn't work out. So that's DJMU3L if you want to check that out. There's some funny stuff on there. But what about Sophie? Sophie from Mars?
That's me.
Yeah.
I'm Sophie. I'm Sophie from Mars. I don't usually spend a long time shouting out my stuff on this show, but this time I will spend a long time shouting out specifically my YouTube and Patreon because I've spent all episode talking about my script that's coming up. My next video, Conspiracy on the Left, is going to be very relevant to like a lot of the stuff we talked about today. Important, terms like stigmatized knowledge and the cultic milieu and all these kinds of words. I'm going to be saying them in a video about communists who should know better, who are promoting horse paste and the Great Reset conspiracy, and also a fun little conspiracy theory you might have heard of called BreadTube is CIA. So, so come check out that soon. If you want to see it early, you can at patreon.com/SophieFromMars. If you are a pleb and cannot afford to subscribe, then you can just follow me. YouTube, Sophie from Mars. My stream archive channel is Sophie from Mars Streams. My Twitter is Sophie from Mars. My Instagram, I guess. And my Twitch is also Sophie from Mars. I'm not streaming Elden Ring. I am enjoying Elden Ring just for myself on my personal time.
Nice.
Can't be done. It can't be done.
But check out Sophie from Mars on YouTube and patreon.com/Sophie from Mars if you want to learn about some whack-ass cringe lord communists who really should not be believing the things they are believing.
That sounds very cool.
So, I guess, Nicole, you're going to take over and do the usual thing where you do all the thank yous and stuff.
Yep. Well,
Nice.
I just want to say thank you, Em, for joining us today. And you are fantastic. I appreciate the wealth of knowledge that you, provided us. And I think chat, can we get some bun claps in the chat to thank Em for joining us? Chats. Be bun clap or bun clap F if you're not a sub. If you're a lowly non-sub, but you still want to participate. Wow, chat. Wow, so nice. But honestly, no, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. You were wonderful.
That's fine.
Awesome. Cool.
All right.
Thanks
Well,
so much.
Maybe if one of my anti-vaxxers finally blows up Parliament, I'll come back on.
Yeah, that'll be a conversation for sure.
All right.
Yeah.
We have one or two things to say about that, yeah.
all right. Well,
All right.
see you, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Okay. That was a joke, by the way. That was a joke that Em made. That was a joke. For the one, it's British humor. If you don't get it because you're not British, it's a British thing. It's a British thing. It's very dry. If you don't get it, you just don't understand and appreciate dry humor. It's what it is. Remember the 4th of November. No, it's the 5th of February. You got it wrong. It's the 5th of February. Right, Husker?
And as you will soon find out, you cannot defeat an enemy that you cannot see.